The Toyota Tacoma's headlights cut through the darkness as Johnny Strong navigated the empty highway, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. 3:47 a.m. The base was 2 hours behind him now, and home was still another hour ahead. He'd kept the early return secret, a surprise for Denny and their boy, 7-year-old Cole. 5 months of desert heat and late-night patrols, and he'd get to see his kid's face light up 5 days early. The deployment had been his 4th since Cole was born, each one harder than the last, but this one had been different. The letters from home had changed around month 3. Cole's drawings, usually full of stick-figure families and smiling sons, had become darker, more frantic. The last one showed a house with all the windows colored black. No people, just a house and those black windows. When he'd asked Denny about it on their weekly video call, she'd laughed it off. "He's 7, Johnny. Kids go through phases. He's fine. Misses you is all." But something in her voice hadn't sounded right. The suburbs materialized around him as dawn threatened on the horizon. Johnny took the familiar turns through his neighborhood, past the Hendersons' place with their immaculate lawn, past the empty lot where the kids played baseball in summer. His house sat at the end of Maple Drive, a modest 3-bedroom ranch they'd stretched to afford before his last promotion to staff sergeant. He cut the engine in the driveway and sat for a moment, letting the silence settle. The porch light was off. Denny usually left it on when he was deployed. Their little ritual, she'd said, keeping the light on until he came home. He grabbed his duffel and approached the door, fishing for his keys. The house felt wrong the moment he stepped inside. Not wrong like ransacked or damaged. Wrong like empty, like the soul had been pulled out of it. The living room was clean, too clean. No shoes by the door, no toys scattered across the carpet, no half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. Cole always had a puzzle going. "Denny." He kept his voice low, not wanting to startle her. "Babe, I'm home." "Nothing." He moved through the house, his training keeping him aware of every shadow, every corner. The kitchen was pristine. Sink empty, counters bare. He checked the fridge, takeout containers, beer, a half-empty bottle of wine. Nothing suggesting a kid lived here. No juice boxes, no string cheese, no chicken nuggets. Cole's room stopped him cold. The bed was made with hospital corners. The toy chest sat closed. The walls where Cole's drawings usually hung were bare, only the tape marks remaining like ghosts. Johnny crossed to the closet and yanked it open. Cole's clothes hung neatly, but when he checked the drawers, they were emptier than they should be. Underwear, socks, a few shirts missing. Enough for a few days away. He found Denny in their bedroom, sprawled across the bed still in her jeans and a t-shirt, an empty wine glass on a nightstand beside 3 pill bottles. He recognized the labels. Ambien, Xanax, something else he didn't know. The rise and fall of her chest was shallow, but steady. "Denny." He shook her shoulder. "Denny, wake up." She stirred, her eyes struggling to focus. When they finally found him, confusion gave way to something that looked like fear. "Johnny? You're not supposed to be home until..." "Where's Cole?" She sat up slowly, running a hand through her unwashed hair. He's with my parents. He's fine. He's just staying with them for a few days." "Why?" "I needed a break." Her voice had an edge to it, defensive. "You've been gone 5 months, Johnny. Do you know how hard it is? Work, taking care of him, the house, everything. I needed a goddamn break. It's 3 in the morning. I want to know why my son isn't in his bed. He's fine. They love having him. My dad's been teaching him about..." She stopped, something flickering across her face. "He's learning a lot. Building character." Johnny studied his wife in the dim light filtering through the curtains. They'd met 8 years ago at a bar near Fort Bragg, and he'd fallen hard for her sharp wit and the way she didn't take shit from anyone. She'd been working as a dental hygienist then, good at her job, reliable. But the woman in front of him looked hollowed out, medicated into submission. "How long has he been there?" "Just a week. Maybe 10 days. 10 days, Denny? You sent our 7-year-old to your parents for 10 days. They're his grandparents. What's wrong with that?" Everything, Johnny thought. He'd met Merle and Deb Weeks 3 times total. Once when he and Denny got engaged, once at the wedding, and once when Cole was born. Merle had served in Vietnam, came back with pieces missing that no doctor could see. He ran a small construction company. the kind that operated mostly in cash and hired men who didn't ask questions. Deb was quiet, subservient, moving through rooms like she was trying not to be noticed. The one time Johnny had tried to connect with Merle over their shared military experience, the older man had looked at him with dead eyes and said, "You kids play soldier now. We fought a war. Give me the address," Johnny said. "It's 4 a.m. I said, "Give me the fucking address." Then he flinched. He never swore at her, never raised his voice. But something cold had settled in his chest, and he recognized it from the field, the feeling he got right before everything went sideways. She scribbled the address on a piece of paper from the nightstand, her hand shaking. "Johnny, don't make a scene. Please. My dad's just trying to help. He said Cole needed discipline. Structure. Said I was too soft on him. You told your father to discipline my son? I didn't, it's not like that. He offered to take him for a while, teach him some things. Guy things. You weren't here, and I was drowning," and her voice cracked. "I thought it would be good for him." Johnny took the address and walked out without another word. Behind him, he heard Denny call his name, then the sound of her crying, but he was already moving, already calculating the route. The Weeks house sat 40 minutes away in an older neighborhood where the houses had more land between them. Johnny made it in 30, breaking every speed limit, his mind running through scenarios. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe Cole was fine, learning to fish or use tools or whatever bonding shit Merle had in mind. But those black windows and Cole's drawing kept flashing in his mind, and the wrongness of his empty house wouldn't leave him. He parked 2 houses down and approached on foot. The Weeks property was larger than the neighbors, with a chain-link fence surrounding the backyard. A detached garage sat dark beside the house, and a dim light glowed from one window. The kitchen, maybe. Johnny moved around to the back gate, years of tactical training making him silent despite his size. The gate was unlocked. He slipped through. The backyard was a mess of construction equipment, old lumber, rusted machinery parts. A work shed stood against the back fence, its door hanging crooked. And there, near the center of the yard, illuminated by a single floodlight on a pole, was his son. Cole knelt beside a rectangular hole in the ground, his small hands wrapped around a shovel handle that was too big for him. Even from 30 feet away, Johnny could see the blood on his palms, the mechanical way the boy lifted and dumped earth. The hole was deep, 4 feet at least. Cole had to throw the dirt up and out. Johnny started forward, rage and horror warring in his chest, but something made him stop. The way Cole moved like a machine, like something programmed. And a complete silence. No crying, no sounds of exhaustion, just the scrape of the shovel and the thud of dirt. He circled wider, staying in the shadows, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. That's when he saw the fresh mound near the back fence. New dirt, darker than the surrounding ground, roughly 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. A grave. Johnny's blood turned to ice. He moved toward his son, no longer caring about stealth. "Cole." The boy's head snapped up, and Johnny saw his face fully for the first time. Hollow eyes, the kind Johnny had seen on the faces of POWs in training videos. Cheeks sunken, lips cracked and bleeding. Dirt and dried tears streaked across his skin. "Daddy." The word came out like a question, like Cole wasn't sure if he was real. Johnny jumped into the hole and grabbed his son, pulling him close. Cole's body was rigid at first. Then he started shaking, violent tremors that ran through his small frame. "I've got you. I've got you, buddy. You're safe now." "I can't stop," Cole whispered against Johnny's chest. "Grandpa said I can't sleep until I dig my own bed. He checks. He always checks." "How long have you been out here?" "I don't. Since yesterday morning? The day before?" "I don't know, Daddy. I'm so tired." Johnny lifted his son out of the hole, noting how light he was, how his wrists looked like they'd lost weight. He set Cole down on solid ground and examined his hands. The blisters had burst and reformed. Some were infected, the flesh angry and swollen. "Cole, what's in that mound by the fence?" The boy's face went even paler, if that was possible. His eyes darted to the house, then to the mound, then back to Johnny. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Grandpa's dog. His name was Duke. He was old and mean, but he didn't deserve it, Daddy." "Didn't deserve what?" Cole's whole body started shaking again. Grandpa said I had to learn about consequences, about what happens when you disobey. Duke bit me when I tried to pet him, and Grandpa said, the boy couldn't continue, tears streaming down his face. He made me hold the bag over Duke's head. He made me hold it while the dog stopped moving. He said if I let go, he'd make me do it to something else. Someone else. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Johnny's vision blurred red at the edges, and every instinct screamed at him to march into that house and end Merle Weeks right now. But Cole was here, traumatized and hurt, and he needed his father present, not consumed by rage. Did he hurt you? Touch you? No, not like that. He makes me work. All the time. Digging, carrying things, cleaning the shed. He says I'm soft. That mom made me weak. That he's going to make me a man. Cole's voice cracked. But I'm only 7, Daddy. I don't want to be a man yet. I just want to go home. Johnny pulled out his phone, his hands steadier than he felt. He took photos of Cole's hands of the hole of the grave. Then he carefully, gently, picked up his son and started toward the truck. We're going to the hospital first. Get you checked out. Then, no. Cole grabbed Johnny's shirt, panic in his eyes. He'll find out. He said if I tell anyone, he'll come for Mom. He said he'll make her dig too. He said things, Daddy. Bad things. He's not going to touch her. Or you. Ever again. You don't know him. You don't know what he can do. But Johnny knew men like Merle Weeks. Had known plenty in his years of service. Men who came back from war broken and decided to break everything around them rather than admit they needed help. Men who mistook cruelty for strength and violence for discipline. The front door of the house opened as Johnny reached his truck. Merle Weeks stood silhouetted in the doorway, a cigarette glowing in his hand. He was tall, lean in the way that came from hard labor rather than exercise. Even from across the yard, Johnny could feel the man's eyes on them. Taking what's mine, soldier boy. Merle's voice carried across the distance, rough as gravel. Johnny carefully set Cole in the truck, locked the doors, then turned to face his son's torturer. He's not yours. He's never been yours. Your wife gave him to me. Said she couldn't handle him. Said he needed a firm hand. Merle took a drag on his cigarette, the tip flaring bright. Just started to make progress, too. Boy was soft as butter when he got here. Getting tougher now. By making him dig his own grave? By forcing him to suffocate your dog? Duke was dying anyway. Mercy killing. And the hole? That's character building. My old man made me dig foxholes when I was 8. Did a whole goddamn trench system in our backyard. Made me a survivor. Made you a sadist. Merle stepped off the porch, and Johnny saw him fully now. Mid-60s, muscles gone ropey with age, but still strong. Hands scarred and calloused. Eyes that held no warmth, no humanity. Just cold calculation. You got no idea what it takes to raise a boy right. You're gone 9 months out of the year, playing soldier in the sandbox. I'm doing what you can't, making him hard enough to survive. You tortured my son. I disciplined him. There's a difference. Merle flicked his cigarette into the dirt. And you're going to take him home, and Denny's going to send him back in a week because she can't handle him, and we're going to continue his education. Or, he paused, letting the word hang. You can make a fuss. Call the cops. Try to press charges. And we'll see what a judge thinks about a father who's never home versus grandparents who are just trying to help raise a difficult child. Difficult child? He's 7 years old. Old enough to learn respect. To understand consequences. Merle's smile was a knife in the dark. You know what your problem is, Johnny? You think the world is fair. You think there are rules. I learned different in the jungle. There's only power. Who has it? Who doesn't? And what you're willing to do to keep it. Johnny's fists clenched, but he forced himself to breathe, to think. Merle was baiting him, wanting him to throw the first punch. Everything in him screamed to beat this man into the ground. But Cole was watching from the truck, and more violence was the last thing the boy needed to see. Stay away from my family. Or what? You'll file a report? I've been investigated before, soldier boy. Nothing ever sticks. I know people. People who owe me. People who understand that sometimes discipline looks harsh to soft eyes. Merle stepped closer, and Johnny caught the smell of whiskey beneath the cigarette smoke. You want to protect your boy? Then man up and be there. Or step aside and let someone who knows what they're doing finish the job. Johnny walked back to his truck, every step measured, refusing to give Merle the satisfaction of seeing him run. He climbed in, started the engine, and drove away with Cole huddled in the passenger seat, small and broken. In the rearview mirror, Merle Weeks stood in the middle of the street, watching them go, smoking another cigarette like he had all the time in the world. The emergency room at Mercy General was quiet at 4:30 a.m. A tired nurse took one look at Cole's hands and called for a doctor immediately. Johnny sat in the examination room while a young resident, Dr. Sarah Chun, her name tag read, cleaned and dressed Cole's wounds. "These are severe," Dr. Chun said, her voice carefully neutral. "Second-degree burns from friction, multiple infections." "How did this happen?" Johnny met her eyes. "He was made to dig. For 2 days straight. Made to dig." She repeated the words slowly, and Johnny saw the gears turning. "By whom?" "His grandfather." Dr. Chun glanced at Cole, who had retreated into himself, staring at the wall with those hollow eyes. She finished bandaging his hands, then stood and motioned for Johnny to follow her into the hallway. "I'm required by law to report suspected child abuse," she said once they were alone. "Those injuries are consistent with forced labor. The malnutrition, the signs of sleep deprivation. This wasn't an accident." "I know. Report it. Do whatever you need to do." "Where's the mother?" "Home. She sent him to her parents. Didn't know what was happening." The lie tasted bitter, but Johnny wasn't sure yet how much Denny knew, how much she'd allowed. That reckoning would come later. "And you're the father? Where have you been?" "Deployed. Afghanistan. Got back early." Johnny ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. 5 months away, and I come home to this." Dr. Chin's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry. I have to ask these questions." "I understand. Ask whatever you need. I want this documented. I want everything on record." Over the next hour, Dr. Chun performed a full examination. She documented every bruise, every cut, every sign of trauma. She had a specialist come in to evaluate Cole's psychological state. Through it all, Cole barely spoke, answering questions in monosyllables when he answered at all. When it was over, Dr. Chun pulled Johnny aside again. "I've contacted Child Protective Services. They'll want to interview both you and your wife, and they'll definitely want to talk to the grandparents. In the meantime, Cole can go home with you, but someone will be by within 48 hours to follow up." "What about charges? Can they arrest him?" "That's up to the police, not me. But with this documentation, you have a strong case. The question is whether your son can handle testifying, whether he can go through that process." She paused. "Between you and me, the system doesn't always work the way it should. Men like the grandfather you described, they know how to work the angles. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this might not end the way you want it to." Johnny understood what she wasn't saying. That sometimes monsters walked free. That sometimes the bad guys won. Not this time, he thought. Not with my son. He carried Cole out to the truck as dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that seemed obscene given the darkness of the past few hours. Cole had finally fallen asleep against Johnny's shoulder, his small body finally giving in to exhaustion. At home, Denny waited on the porch, still in the same clothes from earlier. She stood when she saw them, her hand going to her mouth. "Oh my God, Johnny, what happened to him? What happened?" Johnny's voice was ice. "You know what happened. You sent him there." I didn't know my dad would." "Yes, you did." He carried Cole past her into the house, heading for the boys' room. "Maybe not the specifics, but you knew something was wrong. You knew, and you left him there anyway." He laid Cole in his bed, pulling the blankets up carefully around his bandaged hands. The boys stirred but didn't wake, lost in whatever dreams or nightmares came after trauma. When Johnny came back out, Denny was sitting at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. "I couldn't handle it anymore. You're never here, and he was getting so difficult, and my dad said, 'Your dad is a monster. He's my father. He tortured our son.'" Johnny's control finally snapped, his voice rising. "He made a 7-year-old boy dig his own grave for 2 days straight. He made him suffocate a dog. What the fuck were you thinking?" Denny flinched at every word. "He said Cole needed discipline, that I was too soft. And I was so tired, Johnny. So tired of doing everything alone. I thought would be good for him. To learn from a man. To have some structure. Structure? Jesus Christ, Denny. There's structure, and then there's abuse. You had to know the difference. I didn't know it would be like that. My dad was strict with me growing up, but he never. She stopped, and something flickered across her face. A memory, maybe something she'd buried deep. Never what? Nothing. It was different. I was different. Johnny studied his wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. The woman he'd married had been strong, independent, sharp. The woman in front of him was a ghost, medicating herself into numbness, sending her child away rather than protect him. Did he hurt you? No, not really. He was just hard, demanding. But that's what fathers do, right? They push you to be better. That's not what fathers do, Denny. That's what abusers do. Johnny sat down across from her, trying to find some thread of the woman he'd loved. CPS is coming. Probably in the next day or two. You need to tell them everything. About your childhood, about why you sent Cole there, about what you knew or suspected. They'll take him away. They'll say I'm an unfit mother. Are you? The question hung between them like a blade. Denny's face crumpled, and she started crying. Real tears this time, not the medicated numbness from before. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I just wanted a break. Just a few days where I didn't have to be the only one responsible for everything. Is that so terrible? Yes, Johnny said quietly. When you hand our son over to a sadist, yes, it is. He stood and walked to the bedroom, locking the door behind him. He needed to sleep, to process, to plan. Because Dr. Chun had been right, the system wouldn't be enough. Men like Merle Weeks didn't fear judges or social workers. They feared only one thing: power, and what someone was willing to do with it. Johnny pulled out his phone and started making calls. He knew people too. Different people than Merle, but just as capable. More capable, maybe, because they'd learned to use violence as a tool rather than a weapon. And unlike Merle Weeks, Johnny Strong hadn't come back from War Broken. He'd come back knowing exactly what he was capable of. The next morning, Johnny woke to find 2 voicemails and a text. The voicemails were from his commanding officer, checking on his well-being and reminding him he had 3 weeks terminal leave before his next assignment. The text was from someone he hadn't heard from in 2 years. Randy Becker. Heard you're back stateside. Need anything? Randy Becker. They'd served together in Iraq, before Randy took an early out after catching shrapnel in his leg during an ambush. Last Johnny heard, Randy was doing private security work, the kind that didn't ask too many questions and paid in cash. Johnny typed back, "Might. Can we meet?" The response came immediately. Same diner as always. 1300. Cole was still asleep, his breathing steady but his face troubled even in rest. Johnny checked the bandages. Dr. Chun had done good work, then went to the kitchen. Denny sat at the table, a cold cup of coffee in front of her, looking like she hadn't slept. "I'm meeting someone this afternoon," Johnny said. "You stay with Cole. Don't leave the house. Don't answer the door unless it's CPS or the police." "Who are you meeting?" "Someone who can help." "Help with what?" Johnny poured himself coffee, taking a moment to choose his words. "Making sure your father understands that Cole is off limits. Permanently. Johnny, don't do anything stupid. If you hurt him, you'll go to jail. Then where will we be? We'll be somewhere where our son is safe. That's all that matters right now." He showered and changed into civilian clothes. Jeans, a plain black t-shirt, boots. Looking at himself in the mirror, he saw the man he'd become over 8 years of service. Harder, leaner, more willing to do what needed doing. The Army had taught him to protect, to serve, to follow rules of engagement. But there were no rules of engagement for what he was about to do. The diner sat on the edge of town, a grease-stained relic from the 50s that somehow kept attracting customers despite the health code violations and surly waitstaff. Randy Becker sat in a back booth, a cup of coffee and an untouched slice of pie in front of him. He looked older than 32, with gray in his stubble and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there in Iraq. "Brother," Randy said, standing to grip Johnny's hand. "You look like shit. Feel like it." They sat, and Randy pushed the pie across the table. "You sounded off in your text. What's going on?" Johnny laid it out. Every detail from Cole's empty room to Merle's threats to Dr. Chin's warning about the system. Randy listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each sentence. When Johnny finished, Randy leaned back and crossed his arms. So you want me to help you solve this problem? I want you to help me understand my options. Your options. Randy smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Option 1. You go through proper channels. File reports, get lawyers involved, let CPS do their investigation. Could take months. Could result in nothing, especially if Grandpa's as connected as he thinks he is. Meanwhile, your kid lives in fear and the old man walks free. Option 2. You handle it personally. But you've got a family, Johnny. A career. You can't afford to get caught. What if I don't care about getting caught? Randy studied him for a long moment. Yeah, you do. Maybe not for yourself, but for Cole. Kid needs his dad, not a dad in prison. So let's talk about option 3, which is you make the problem disappear, but you do it smart. No heat, no blowback, nothing that traces back to you. Randy pulled out his phone and swiped through some photos, then turned the screen to face Johnny. I work with some guys now. Former military, mostly. We handle delicate situations. Usually for people with money who need things done quietly. The photos showed men in tactical gear, night vision equipment, weapons that weren't standard civilian issue. You're talking about? I'm not talking about anything specific. Randy cut him off. I'm saying there are people who can help, and there are ways to help that don't involve you getting your hands dirty. But it costs money, and it requires trust. How much money? Depends on the job. For something like this, making sure someone understands they need to disappear from your life, maybe leave town permanently, could run 10, 15 grand. For something more permanent, higher, much higher. Johnny thought about his savings, about $30,000, most of it from deployment bonuses and hazard pay he'd socked away for Cole's future. College money, he'd always thought. A head start. Now it might buy his son's safety instead. I need to think about it. Don't think too long, Randy said. Guys like your father-in-law, they don't just let things go. He knows you took Cole, which means he knows you're a threat to whatever he's got going on. He'll make a move, and if you're not ready. A waitress came by to refill their coffee, and they sat in silence until she left. Johnny's phone buzzed, a text from Denny. CPS is here. Where are you? I have to go, Johnny said, standing. But Randy, I might need that help. Soon. I'll be ready. Just say the word. The Child Protective Services investigator was a woman in her 40s named Carolyn Lyon. She sat in Johnny's living room with a laptop and a stack of forms, her expression professionally sympathetic as she asked questions about Cole's welfare, about the family dynamics, about what had happened to Merle Weeks' house. Cole sat next to Johnny on the couch, still quiet, still retreating into himself whenever anyone looked at him directly. Denny perched on the edge of the recliner, her hands twisting in her lap. Cole, Carolyn said gently, can you tell me what happened to your grandpa's house? The boy shook his head, pressing closer to Johnny. It's okay. You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you. That's what Mom said before, Cole whispered. She said Grandpa would take care of me. Teach me things. Denny flinched but said nothing. Carolyn made notes, then turned to Johnny. Mr. Strong, you serve in Afghanistan recently? Just got back 2 days ago. And you discovered your son at your in-law's residence in the early morning hours? That's correct. He was being forced to dig a hole in the backyard. His hands were bleeding, infected. He'd been out there for 2 days. Can you describe the conditions more specifically? Johnny pulled out his phone and showed her the photos. Cole's hands, the hole, the grave. Carolyn's professional mask slipped for a moment, genuine horror crossing her face before she regained control. I'll need copies of these, and I'll need to visit the Weeks residence to document the scene. They might have cleaned it up by now, Johnny said. Even so, we'll need to conduct our investigation. Carolyn turned back to Cole. Sweetie, did Grandpa ever hit you? Cole shook his head. He made me work. Said if I stopped, he'd make Mom work instead. Said if I told anyone, something bad would happen to her. What kind of bad things? But Cole had shut down again, and no amount of gentle coaxing could bring him back. After an hour, Carolyn packed up her materials. I've got enough to open a full investigation. I'll be visiting the Weeks residence tomorrow, and I'll be interviewing them separately. In the meantime, Cole should stay here with you, Mr. Strong. Mrs. Strong, I'll need you to submit to a psychological evaluation. And what? Denny's voice cracked. Why? Because you placed your child in a harmful situation. We need to understand your judgment and whether there are any underlying issues that contributed to this decision. Carolyn's tone remained professional but firm. This isn't punitive. It's protective. For Cole. After Carolyn left, Denny retreated to the bedroom. Johnny heard her on the phone, her voice low and urgent, probably calling her mother. He turned his attention to Cole, who had curled up on the couch, his eyes unfocused. Hey, buddy, you hungry? Cole shrugged. How about we make some mac and cheese? Your favorite. Grandpa said mac and cheese is for babies. Johnny felt something crack inside his chest. Well, Grandpa's wrong about a lot of things. And you know what? I love mac and cheese, and I'm definitely not a baby. That got a ghost of a smile from Cole. You're not. Nope. I'm a tough soldier who eats mac and cheese whenever he wants. Johnny ruffled his son's hair gently. Come on, help me cook. They made dinner together, Cole moving slowly, his bandaged hands making everything difficult. But Johnny was patient, talking about nothing in particular, trying to coax his son back into something resembling normalcy. It was like trying to rebuild a house after a bomb had gone through it. You had to start with the foundation, one brick at a time. That night, Cole refused to sleep alone. Johnny set up a sleeping bag on the floor of the master bedroom, and Cole curled up there while Denny took the guest room. Around midnight, Johnny woke to the sound of crying. Cole sat up in the sleeping bag, tears streaming down his face. I can't stop seeing it, Daddy. Duke's eyes. The way he looked at me when... Come here. Johnny pulled his son into bed beside him, holding him close. It's not your fault. None of this is your fault. But I did it. I held the bag. You were scared. You were trying to survive. That's what we do, Cole. We survive. And then, when we're safe, we heal. Will I heal? Yes. It'll take time, but yes. I promise. Cole fell asleep eventually, his head on Johnny's chest, his breathing finally steady. But Johnny lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind working through the problem of Merle Weeks. The system would try. Carolyn seemed competent, motivated. But Johnny had seen enough of bureaucracy to know how it worked. Investigations took time. Even with photographic evidence, even with Cole's testimony, there would be delays. Lawyers. Challenges. And Merle had been right about one thing. He knew people. Knew how to work the system. By the time charges were filed, if they were filed, months could pass. Merle would be out there, free angry. And angry men like that didn't just let things go. They retaliated. They found ways to hurt you where you were weakest. And Johnny's weakest point was sleeping in his arms right now. He thought about Randy's offer. 10 to 15,000 to make someone understand they needed to leave permanently. It would drain his savings, but what good was money if Cole wasn't safe? But there was another option. One that didn't involve hired guns or outside help. One that put him in direct control. Johnny had been trained to plan missions, to assess threats, to neutralize targets. He'd done it in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in places whose names he wasn't allowed to speak. He'd killed bad men who'd hurt innocent people, and he'd come home clean because it had been sanctioned, authorized, part of the job. This wouldn't be sanctioned. This would be personal. And if he got caught, he'd lose everything. His career, his freedom, his ability to be there for Cole. But if he didn't do something, Merle would keep circling, keep threatening, keeping the monster in the darkness that Cole would never escape from. Johnny made his decision somewhere around 3 a.m., watching his son sleep, feeling the weight of what came next settling into his bones like an old, familiar burden. Some problems couldn't be solved by rules and procedures. Some problems required a different kind of solution. Carolyn Lyon returned 3 days later, her expression carefully neutral, but her body language telling a different story. She sat across from Johnny and Denny in the living room, a thin folder in her lap. I visited the Weeks residence, she began. The hole had been filled in, the grave site disturbed. Mr. Weeks claims the hole was part of a landscaping project he was working on with Cole, and the grave was for a dog that died of natural causes. That's bullshit, Johnny said flatly. You saw the photos. I know, but without the physical evidence still present, it becomes harder to prove. Mr. and Mrs. Weeks are claiming you misunderstood what you saw, that you're using this as leverage in a custody dispute. There is no custody dispute. There is now. Mrs. Weeks filed for grandparents' rights this morning, claiming that Cole's welfare is being jeopardized by an absent father and an unstable mother. Carolyn looked at Denny. They're using your prescription drug use as evidence of unfitness. Denny went pale. I only take what my doctor prescribes. How many doctors are prescribing for you? Silence. That's what I thought, Carolyn continued. Look, I believe your story. The medical evidence supports abuse. But Mr. Weeks has an attorney, a good one apparently, and they're already building counter-narrative. Unless Cole is willing to testify in detail about what happened, this is going to become a he said, she said situation. What about the dog? Johnny asked. If we exhume the body, there should be evidence of suffocation. Mr. Weeks had the dog cremated. Yesterday. Carolyn's expression darkened. Convenient timing. Johnny felt the familiar cold settle in his chest. Merle was cleaning up, covering his tracks, getting ahead of the investigation. The old man had done this before, had maneuvered through systems designed to protect children. He knew exactly what he was doing. So what happens now? I keep investigating. I build the case. But I want you to understand, this could take months, and there's no guarantee of the outcome you want. Mr. Weeks doesn't have any prior reports of abuse, no criminal record beyond some bar fights in his 20s. He presents as a concerned grandfather trying to help an overwhelmed daughter with a difficult child. And we present as what? A military father with PTSD who overreacted to normal discipline, and a mother with substance abuse issues who's being manipulated by her aggressive husband. Carolyn held up a hand before Johnny could explode. I don't believe that. But that's the story they're telling, and it's compelling enough that a judge might buy it. After Carolyn left, Johnny sat in silence, processing the implications. The system was failing, just like Dr. Chun had warned. Merle was winning because he understood the game, and Johnny was losing because he believed justice meant something. Denny broke the silence first. We need a lawyer. A good one. We need more than that. What does that mean? Johnny looked at his wife, really studied her. How much did you know about what your father was capable of? I told you. No. The truth, Denny. Because I need to know if you're with me or against me. She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. He was hard on me growing up. Made me work in his construction yard every summer from age 10. No breaks, no water unless I earned it. If I complained, he'd add an hour. If I cried, another hour. By the time I was 16, I could work 10-hour days in the heat without stopping. That's abuse. That's how he saw strength. And part of me thought it had made me stronger, made me able to handle anything. So when he offered to take Cole, to teach him the same lessons, I thought. She finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. I thought I was giving him what I'd had, a chance to be tough. You gave him trauma. I know that now. I see it now. But in the moment, when I was drowning and exhausted and you're thousands of miles away, his offer felt like a lifeline. And I took it. Her voice cracked. I'm a terrible mother. You made a terrible mistake. There's a difference. Johnny leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. But here's what matters now. Are you with me? Because I'm going to protect our son, and I'm going to make sure your father never comes near him again. The question is whether you're going to help me or try to stop me. Help you do what? Whatever needs doing. Denny studied his face, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe understanding. She'd married a soldier, and for the first time since he'd come home, she was seeing what that meant. I'm with you, she said quietly. Whatever you need. Then here's what's going to happen. You're going to get clean, actually clean, not just managing. You're going to get into therapy. You're going to cooperate with CPS and do everything they ask. You're going to be the perfect mother while I handle the other problem. What other problem? Your father. Johnny, I'm not asking your permission, Denny. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You focus on Cole. Help him heal. I'll make sure Merle isn't a threat anymore. If you hurt him, you'll go to prison. Only if I get caught. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Denny opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Because she knew him, knew what he was capable of when pushed far enough. And maybe some small part of her wanted her father to pay for what he'd done. Not just to Cole, but to her. To the little girl who'd worked herself bloody in the summer heat, who'd learned that love came with conditions and pain was the price of approval. How will you do it? The less you know, the better. Johnny stood and went to check on Cole, who was in his room drawing again. But this time, the drawings were different. Not black windows and empty houses. This one showed two figures, one big, one small, holding hands. The sun was yellow and bright, and there was a dog in the corner that looked nothing like the dog Merle had killed. That's nice, buddy, Johnny said softly. Who are they? You and me. After we're safe. We are safe. I promise. Not yet. Cole looked up at him with those old eyes that had seen too much too soon. But we will be, when Grandpa is gone. The simple truth of it hit Johnny like a fist. Cole knew, maybe not the specifics, but he understood that his father was about to do something to make the monster disappear. And the boy was okay with it. Maybe even hoped for it. That night, after Cole finally fell asleep, Johnny made the call. Randy? It's me. I need the help we talked about. Figured you would. When? Soon as possible. But I want to handle part of it myself. That's not how this works, brother. You keep your hands clean, that's the whole point. I know, but I need to look him in the eyes when it happens. I need him to know why. Randy was quiet for a moment. That's a mistake. Emotional involvement leads to mistakes, and mistakes lead to consequences. I don't care. This is personal, and it stays personal until the end. All right, your call. But if you're going in, you need to do it right. No half measures, no chances for him to recover and come back at you. You understand what I'm saying? I understand. Meet me tomorrow. Same place. I'll walk you through it. Johnny ended the call and stood in the darkened living room, looking out at the quiet suburban street. Somewhere out there, Merle Weeks was sleeping soundly, confident in his power, secure in the knowledge that he'd beaten the system before and could do it again. But Merle had made one crucial mistake. He'd hurt the wrong man's son, and Staff Sergeant Johnny Strong was about to teach him the difference between surviving war and winning one. The plan came together over the next week with the precision of a military operation. Randy provided equipment, gloves, a burner phone, a hunting knife with no serial numbers. He also provided intelligence, calling in favors from contacts at the local PD to get information on Merle's routines. The old man was predictable. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, he drove to a bar called Murphy's on the edge of town. He'd drink for exactly 2 hours, always 4 beers and 2 shots of whiskey, then drive home. The route took him past a stretch of undeveloped land, a failed housing project from the early 2000s that had been abandoned when the developer went bankrupt. Dark, isolated, perfect. You sure about this? Randy asked when they met for the final time. Last chance to let me handle it clean. I'm sure. Then listen close. You do this, you're crossing a line. There's no coming back from it. You'll carry it for the rest of your life. I've already killed people, Randy. Lots of them. That was war. This is murder. It's different. Trust me, I know. Johnny looked at his friend, saw the weight in his eyes, and understood. You've done this before. Twice. Once for money, once for personal reasons. The second one's the one that keeps me up at night. Randy leaned forward, his voice dropping. Make sure you can live with it, brother. Because you don't get to undo it once it's done. I can live with it. All right then. Thursday night. Murphy's. You'll have a 4-minute window between when he leaves the bar and when he hits the main road. That's it. For minutes to do what you need to do and get gone. That's plenty. Randy handed over a canvas bag with the equipment. There's a box of latex gloves in there, a cheap .22 revolver with 6 rounds, and a disposable phone. Use the gloves, use the phone to call me when it's done, then ditch everything in the river at the old bridge. Weapon, phone, gloves, everything. What about his car? Leave it. Someone will find it eventually, call in. With his blood alcohol, cops will probably figure he crashed somewhere and wandered off. They'll search for a few days, then give up. Happens all the time with drunks. Johnny took the bag, feeling the weight of it, the weight of what he was about to do. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't get caught. Thursday came cold and clear, with stars bright overhead and a wind that cut through clothing. Johnny sat in his truck 3 blocks from Murphy's, watching the entrance, waiting. At 9:15, Merle Weeks stumbled out, keys in hand, heading for his pickup. Johnny started his engine and pulled out, keeping distance, following the familiar route. The roads were empty this time of night, just Johnny and Merle and the darkness between them. When Merle's truck turned onto the old access road for the abandoned development, Johnny accelerated, closing the gap. He flashed his high beams once, and Merle pulled over, probably thinking it was a cop, probably cursing his bad luck. Johnny parked behind him and got out, keeping his face in shadow. Merle climbed out of his truck, swaying slightly, squinting against Johnny's headlights. "The fuck you want?" Merle called out. "I wasn't speeding." Johnny walked forward slowly, and recognition dawned on Merle's face. The old man's expression shifted from confusion to anger to something that might have been fear. "Soldier boy, what's this about?" "You know what it's about. I haven't been near your brat. Haven't even called. Been staying away just like you wanted. Because you're building a legal case. Trying to take him through the courts." Johnny kept walking, closing the distance. "You actually think you're going to win? I know the game better than you do. By the time my lawyer's done, you'll be lucky to get supervised visits." Merle pulled himself up straighter, trying to project confidence despite the alcohol in his system. "Your wife's a junkie, and you're a killer with PTSD. What judge is going to?" Johnny punched him. A quick jab to the solar plexus that folded Merle in half, gasping. The old man went down on one knee, and Johnny grabbed him by the collar, dragging him toward the tree. "You made him kill a dog. You made him dig for 2 days straight. You traumatized my 7-year-old son." Each sentence was punctuated by another drag, another few feet into the darkness. "And you thought there wouldn't be consequences?" Merle tried to fight back, throwing a wild punch that Johnny blocked easily. The old man was strong for his age, but he was drunk and out of practice, and Johnny had been training for combat his entire adult life. It wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't meant to be. Johnny threw Merle against a tree and pulled out the knife Randy had provided. The blade gleamed in the moonlight, filtering through branches. "Wait," Merle gasped. "Wait, we can talk about this. I'll drop the lawsuit. I'll leave you alone." "Too late for that. I'm Denny's father. You're a monster. And monsters don't get to negotiate." Merle's bravado crumbled, and Johnny saw the fear now, real and raw. "Please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I was trying to help. You thought you could break him. Make him like you. But here's what you didn't understand, Merle. Some things, once you break them, they don't come back together right. And some fathers," Johnny raised a knife, "some fathers will do anything to protect their sons." What happened next took less than a minute. Johnny had learned to kill quickly and efficiently, and despite the personal nature of this, despite the rage burning in his chest, he didn't drag it out. Merle Weeks died in the darkness, his blood soaking into the ground, his last breath a ragged wheeze. Johnny cleaned the knife on Merle's shirt, then wrapped everything, knife, gloves, the burner phone, in plastic and carried it back to his truck. He drove to the old bridge Randy had mentioned, stopped in the middle, and threw the bag into the dark water below. Then he went home. Denny was waiting up, sitting in the living room with all the lights off. She looked up when he came in, and he saw the question in her eyes. "It's done," he said simply. She nodded slowly, and tears started streaming down her face. Not sadness, Johnny realized. Relief. Whatever part of her that had still been that little girl seeking her father's approval died in that moment. And what remained was just a woman glad that the monster was finally gone. "What do I tell my mother?" "Nothing. She'll call tomorrow when he doesn't come home. You act concerned. You help look for him. You don't know anything except he went to Murphy's and never came back." "Okay." Johnny went to check on Cole, who was sleeping soundly for the first time since Johnny had found him. He touched his son's hair gently, careful not to wake him, and made a silent promise. Never again. Whatever it took, whoever threatened him, Johnny would handle it. Because that's what fathers did. They protected, no matter the cost. The police found Merle's truck 3 days later, abandoned on the access road. They searched the surrounding area, but found nothing. No body, no blood trail, no evidence of foul play. With his blood alcohol level, which they estimated from the number of drinks witnesses at Murphy's said he'd had, the prevailing theory was that he'd crashed, wandered off disoriented, and either died of exposure or fell into one of the old foundation pits scattered throughout the abandoned development. Deb Weeks filed a missing persons report, but her statements were confused, contradictory. She seemed more relieved than distressed, which made some detectives suspicious, but without evidence, there was nothing to pursue. CPS closed their investigation after 2 months, finding insufficient evidence to support the abuse claims now that the primary witness, Merle, was gone and the physical evidence had been destroyed. But they kept the case file open, noting concerns about Cole's welfare and Denny's mental health. It was a hollow victory, legally speaking, but it was enough. Cole started therapy with a specialist in childhood trauma. Progress was slow, but Johnny saw changes. The nightmares came less frequently. The hollow look in his eyes faded gradually, replaced by something that resembled the boy he'd been before. Then he got clean, actually clean, and started working again. She and Johnny rebuilt their marriage slowly, carefully, both of them carrying the weight of what had happened. She never asked for details about that Thursday night, and Johnny never volunteered them. Some things were better left unspoken. 6 months after Merle's disappearance, Johnny's terminal leave ended, and he had to make a decision: re-enlist or separate. The Army was all he'd known since he was 19, but Cole needed him more than the Army did. He signed his discharge papers on a Tuesday afternoon. On Wednesday, he started a new job doing security consulting for a logistics company. Regular hours, home every night, weekends off. It was boring compared to combat, but it was stable. And stability was what his family needed. Randy Becker stayed in touch, checking in every few weeks, making sure Johnny was handling things okay. They never talked about that night directly, but the understanding was there. Randy had helped him cross a line, and that bond wouldn't break easily. 1 year after Merle's disappearance, the police officially classified him as presumed dead, closing the missing persons case. Deb sold the house and moved to Florida, cutting contact with Denny completely. Neither of them minded. Cole turned 9, then 10. He started playing Little League, made friends, did well in school. The trauma didn't disappear. Dr. Warner said it never would completely, but it became integrated, manageable. He had bad days, sure, but they were outnumbered by good ones now. On Cole's 10th birthday, Johnny took him camping, just the two of them. They sat by the fire that night, and Cole asked the question Johnny had been waiting for. "Did you kill Grandpa?" Johnny looked at his son, at the boy who'd grown into something stronger than what Merle had tried to break him into. He thought about lying, but Cole deserved the truth. Yes. Good. The simplicity of it was jarring. But Cole wasn't looking for moral complexity or justification. He just needed to know that his father had protected him in the most permanent way possible. "Does that scare you?" Johnny asked. "No. It makes me feel safe." Cole poked at the fire with a stick. "Dr. Warner says I should be angry about what happened. That it's okay to have feelings about it. She's right. I know. But mostly I just feel glad that he's gone, that he can't hurt anyone else. Is that bad?" "No, buddy. That's survival." They sat in comfortable silence as the fire burned down, and Johnny thought about Randy's warning, that he'd carry this for the rest of his life. And Randy had been right. There were nights Johnny woke up seeing Merle's face, hearing that last wheeze. There were moments of guilt, wondering if there had been another way. But then he'd look at Cole, see him laughing with friends, or focused on homework, or just being a kid, and Johnny knew the truth. He'd make the same choice again, every time, because some lines had to be crossed to protect the people you loved. Some prices had to be paid. And some fathers did what other men couldn't, shouldering the burden so their children didn't have to. The fire died to embers as the stars wheeled overhead, and Johnny Strong sat with his son, both of them scarred but healing, both of them survivors of different kinds of war. And if the cost of Cole's healing was the weight Johnny would carry forever, well, it was a price he was willing to pay. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.